Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jenny.
Happy Friday the 13th.
Yeah, we're going to bring on some misery today for
Oh gosh,
tax credits.
I know this is the day to talk about tax credits is on Friday the 13th.
Hey, it's the death of education as we know it.
Well, I thought that happened some time ago. Didn't we decide that on Wednesday?
Well, yeah, it is coming, but I'm so glad we do have Sherrie on. Sherrie is really, in my opinion, she's the epitome of just what you want a legislator to be. I mean, she's so intelligent. She's got a fantastic academic and educational background, and she's not in the good old boys club. Sherrie's not afraid to say what, she actually thinks and to represent the people that is in her district.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's been a blessing getting to know, excuse me, Sherrie. I do think the great thing too about Sherrie and some of the other people that we know, we may not always agree on everything, but I think that's the thing that I hate about society most today. We've made arguing a bad word, I mean, maybe we should just change it to debate, but people don't want to debate either anymore.
Yeah.
And, that's really honestly the Socratic method of teaching is debate.
Yeah.
Well, I think this, what do you think? Here's what these people say, and you kind of hash that out. And that's where you develop critical thinking. That's how you learn to think about things, by getting ideas from other people and having to think about those in your head and process that in your soul and think about where you come out. And that's critical thinking. And, I love the fact that Sherrie and I may not agree on everything, but we get to have a discussion about it. And often I see something in a new way. So, that's another thing that I really like about her. And I think more people, and I've said this 100 times on our podcast, if you don't want to call it argument, let's call it debate. But let's at least talk about things, not scream at each other.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's just simply not helpful. So let's see if Sherrie's ready to come on this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Representative Conley?
I am awesome. How about you guys?
Right.
It's nice actually out today. We need some rain.
Did it rain in your place last night?
Well, you guys didn't get any. And we just missed it. It just went east of us. So I got up about 12 o'clock and it was thundering and I was going, yes. And then I looked at the radar and went, no. So we didn't get anything. So what's up with you today?
Well, I'm on dad duty for the next couple of days. And so I'm here. That's why it's all blurred in the background, is because I'm at my parents' house. And so dad may come wandering in here in a few minutes. And if he does, I'm going to have to get his coffee. So I didn't want him walking in here in his boxers. You guys will be able to see him in his boxers. So it's blurred behind me.
Funny. Good morning, Dad. You're on live stream.
Yes.
Well, but that's what when we were talking about it earlier, that's what I love about you. And I love the fact that, you've taken such great care of your parents. We both lost our moms, within the last couple of years. And it's, I just feel so strongly about family. I mean, just like they're your kids, they're your parents, and you don't put them in a home.
Not if you can avoid it.
Yeah. So anyway, that's awesome. And we'll be happy to say hi to Dad when he comes walking in.
You may get him. He loves to dance a jig, and then he's got this thing that he does that and I think this is part of his dementia, that when he wants to share something that he can't formulate in his head, it comes out in the form of a song, and it always is the same. It's the same tone. It's the same, I'm not a musician, so I don't know the vernacular, but it's always the same. It always sounds the same, different words. And so,
Oh,
Yeah.
It's so, honestly, we could have a whole program on how the brain works.
We could. And, it's like I was telling you earlier. I mean, and this, that with dementia and Alzheimer's, there's no book, because everybody is different, and it, every day is different, and you have to be very flexible. You definitely cannot be somebody who is, rigid in your expectations and that sort of thing. You just have to roll with it and just try to get through the day.
And remove your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was the other part that was hard for me. You just have to remove because I was at the beginning, I was always getting my feelings hurt. I was like, oh, mom, but it wasn't my mom, it was all of the blood in her brain pressing, making her. So that's the other thing you have to, at least I found I had to do, is just take my feelings out of it and just go, that's not her, but you still love her. Her mom, your mom's in there.
Yeah. Well, and you have to go into their world. You can't expect to bring them into reality. You can't, the things that they once knew, they don't know. They may remember them. I'll tell you this story, and then we can move on to what we're going to talk about. But we were sitting here the other day, and he said, he made the comment. He said, well, who are these other people? And I said, well, who, where do you, who are you talking about? And he was like, well, those people over there and those people over there. And I was like, well, tell me about those people. What do you see? What do they have on? And he was like, well, some of them are military and some of them are civilian. And I said, oh, okay. Yeah. Right. And so then we got to talking. And so I think he was reliving probably a couple of different memories, but, he was probably at some military installation somewhere. And so then we got to talking, and I started asking him, well, have you been here? Have you been here? Because I was telling you that he designed landing systems for the Department of Defense. And so I started asking him all of the places that I knew that he'd been when he was working. And, and then he said, who are you? And I said, well, who do you think I am? And then he was like, well, I don't know. And I said, well, have you been here? Have you been here? And the next thing you know, he said, well, you should know, you're my daughter. And so he had no idea who I was 1 minute. And then through this conversation, then something clicked. And he was like, now I know who you are. So you never know who you're going to get when you're having that conversation. And so, I just let him be whoever he's going to be, whatever age he is. And just as long as he keeps remembering that I'm his daughter. And because there have been, some times when he thinks I'm, somebody his age that he can hit on. So he's done that to my sister-in-law too. It's very awkward to go, Ike, she says, Ike, I'm your daughter-in-law. So that's probably some of his personality from when he was younger coming out in him now. So I bet he was quite a ladies' man in his younger days.
Just something similar happened with my grandpa, but we won't go into that. Well, I wish I had talked to you earlier, because I didn't quite take that approach. And now I kind of wish I had. I hadn't even thought to frame it like that. So I'm hoping there's somebody out there watching this who's going, wow, I didn't come on here to get that, but I sure did need that. So yeah. I think God does that a lot.
I think he does too. You're exactly right.
Puts the words in your mouth because somebody needs to hear it out there. So
that is exactly right. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start in and let's talk. Do you want to talk about the tax credit first? Is that what you want to talk about?
Hey, it's up to y'all. You guys tell me what you want to talk about. We can talk about the tax credit. I listened to your podcast, and I actually had some questions myself, because I too, kind of skimming through there, and I went through, read the rules. It's been a couple of weeks since I've read them, scanned back through just a second ago, and I don't see anywhere where it says that somebody's going to get a 1099 where they're going to have to pay taxes on it. But, maybe my colleagues, what they're referring to is that they want to make sure that there's something in the rules that says that they don't have to pay because you guys know as well as I do that interpretation, if somebody comes in there now isn't interpreting one way and then can come in and interpret it another, and because it doesn't state specifically that the taxpayer doesn't pay taxes on it. Because think about it, when you get a refund from the state, the next year you have to pay taxes on that refund. And so that may be.
I honestly don't. My husband does our taxes, and I sadly didn't know that. That kind of annoys me. Thanks for annoying me, Sherrie.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for that.
I'm glad
But let me back up though, because I don't know that people knew. So before we came on, we were talking about the fact that I read, and this was from 10/11, and it was on KOKH, and it said that there were several legislators that were upset about the tax credit rules, and here were a couple of quotes. It sure makes it look like the accessibility of the tax credit is going to be very difficult for families that don't already have their child in a school of choice, a private school per se, Representative Rhonda Baker added. And I read that to Sherrie this morning. And then I also said this. This was Senator Pugh said, for a parent who's going to take advantage of this program, the tax commission is proposing to treat this like a taxable event where they were going to be issuing, or where they would issue a 1099. This is very concerning because that is, number one, counter to our intent as the legislature. Well, I was a little weirded out when I read that, because everybody knows that when I did the tax credit video, I was just sticking what I found out there. I was happy to receive any criticism, constructive criticism. I just was doing the best I could. But I didn't read anything in there about the 1099. And I certainly didn't understand how. The only thing I can think about what Rhonda Baker's talking about, and tell me what you think, Sherrie, is if you're in the voucher end. So like if you make $75,000 and above, and if you make up from $75,000, or if you make $75,000 and below, and then you make $75,000 to $150,000, you basically get a voucher, because you're not, it's not a credit. You're not earning that much money, because it does say in the rules that they tax your income. So it does come out of income. Yeah. So, or they don't tax your income. I'm just saying they apply the credit to, I should say it that way. They apply the credit to your income tax. So, that doesn't really work. So it's a voucher for those two younger, or those two lower groups. So what I was thinking
actually,
was,
it actually becomes a voucher for that third level also, if you have more than one kid in the system. So, it could impact you. It could impact all of those levels depending on how many kids they have.
Right.
Go ahead. So go ahead.
And so, what were we talking about? Where was I going with that? Oh, yes, I know. Okay. So in those lower income levels, you have to fill out an application for each child. And if Rhonda Baker wants to tell me that we're imposing some kind of restriction for these families just because they have to fill out a separate income or a separate application per child, I'm going to have probably some kind of mental breakdown, because I'm sorry, they're tax dollars. You should have to fill out. I don't know why it's so hard to fill out the paperwork. Fill out the paperwork for each child and turn it in. That's the only thing I could think of. I mean, you got anything on that, Sherrie?
I don't. I'm not sure what she's looking at. And so read again her quote.
Sure makes it look like the accessibility to the tax credit is going to be very difficult for families that don't already have their child in a school of choice. And that has to be what she's talking about, come to think of it, because here's the thing. If you already have your kid in a private school, then you fill out one application, I guess, for all the kids. Isn't that right, Sherrie, or am I wrong?
I'd have to go back and look at it, but I bet what she's talking about is that in order to be able to qualify for the tax credit, your student has to be in a school. You can't apply for the tax credit and then put your child in the school. And so I bet her concern here is that if those that are 75,000 and under may not be able to afford to front the money to pay for the tuition in order to get their child in the school and then be able to get reimbursed for it.
But the rules don't say that either. The rules say,
no, you're right, they don't.
They don't, because they actually say that if you already have your kid in a school and you qualify for the tax credit, you actually just get the money back, because you've already paid it.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you don't have your kid in a school, that's where the warrant came in.
Mm-hmm.
See, so they had to have confirmation from the private school that they were enrolled in the private school. And then that confirmation had to go to the Oklahoma Tax Commission.
Mm.
And then those 2 warrants were issued, which is where I was, getting so I don't like that. I mean, one warrant goes to the private school and then one warrant goes to the family. Why are you issuing 2 warrants?
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if it's because isn't it set up? It seems to me like it was set up to where you get 2 different warrants and it's split in 2 different times in the year. It's at the beginning of the year and then the middle of the year.
I don't think I think you're referring to where you get the money back because you get it in 2 separate lumps. You get it at one point and you get it. So I think that's what you might be thinking about. But honestly, for Rhonda to say, Representative Baker, to say that, that causes some impediment to people, I don't see that.
I bet it has something to do with being able to get your child being able to afford to get your child into a school in order to be able to qualify.
Well, but the way I read it, though, and check me on this too, the way I read it was you didn't have to have your kid in the private school. You just had to have the guarantee basically from the private school that you were entering the private school.
Yeah. I don't know. I thought it said enrolled in.
Well, that's why we have them.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on. Oh, I keep pulling my earphone out because I keep getting my hand caught. There's always something, right? Okay.
You ought to have a scanned in copy of those, Jenny, for the screen so we can see all your notes on there.
Okay, Michael, you could have done that at any point.
No, I said your copy. We want to see your due diligence on that sheet.
Oh, you want to see all my
your notes
doodling on them? My notes.
Well, I want to see if there's like a little comment box that's like WTF, with the arrow pointing down to a word or something on there.
Okay, so be quiet now. All right, so under where it says claiming the private school tax credit, it says if an Oklahoma taxpayer incurs or will incur a qualified expense, will incur on behalf of an eligible student during the tax year, the taxpayer may be eligible to claim the private school tax credit. If a taxpayer has more than one eligible student, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so the taxpayer shall complete and submit the application online and attach the applicable documentation. Taxpayer will include the following with the application: affidavit of enrollment completed by the private school in which the eligible student is enrolled or is expected to enroll.
Okay.
So no, they don't have to be enrolled, where they just get the information from the private school. And I'm saying this like I'm okay with this because I'm still not okay with this, but I'm just saying the private school has to send their information showing that child is going to be enrolled, and then they issue that weird, two forms of voucher to
So I'm not sure what she's talking about then, because as long as the school's going to provide an affidavit to show that they're actually going, and then I don't see that hindering a parent from being able to get their child in. And a lot of private schools, honestly, they want those kids there. And so I can see where some of them would say, bring your child in, pay us a little bit, until we get that warrant from the school and, everything's good. So that's what I would do. If I had a private school, that's the way I would try to operate. If I had the funding behind me to be able to operate without having to have necessarily all of those. And maybe you might have to create some kind of a policy within the school in order to be able to determine who can do that and who can't. I don't know. Just my thoughts.
Well, you had some questions. We kind of blew past those. So let's go back to your questions.
Yeah. Well, mine really were just, I love that you did all of the digging to say, if you make $75,000 a year, here's the house you can buy. And, here's how much taxes you're going to pay on that. And so I was curious if the 250,000, I mean, think about this. So the way things have changed over the last 3 years, you said 75,000, you can buy a $250,000 house. But $250,000 house is not much anymore. I've got a 25-year-old, him and his wife have been looking for a house. And I remember, of course, I'm going to sound like my parents now. But back whenever this house that I'm in right now is my parents' house, they bought this in 1970, I think paid like $27,000 for the house at the time. It's like, I don't know how many square feet. I think it's probably 2,600 square feet.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a nice size house. So, now they have been looking for a home and you cannot find anything that is move-in, doesn't need anything done to it for under 225, 250. They look at 180,000 is kind of what they're looking at to pay for a house. And those are dumps. I mean, those are houses that need to be completely redone on the inside and the outside in not necessarily decent neighborhoods. And, you were talking about on their $250,000 house. Well, that doesn't get you much anymore. And most people can't even afford that these days with Biden inflation,
Well, and there's a huge housing bubble for sure. Huge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you want to say anything about the housing bubble, Michael?
No, we don't want to get into that.
Okay.
Everything's in such a major bubble.
It is.
The finance guy over here and I have had numerous discussions about the housing bubble, and I see your point. I mean, you're right that the housing prices are so inflated anymore that it is kind of hard to do that. But again, I was just trying to do a perspective analysis.
Well,
I like that though.
Well, just to give a small another little example, my house that I bought in the Village back in early 2000s, I bought for about $80,000. That same house right now is for sale for almost $300,000.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly the same, other than paint color. I mean, it's no different than when I owned that house. Yeah.
So that really puts in perspective.
Good night.
Thinking about. It kind of irritates me whenever I start thinking about what's going on with the housing market. Just because, like I said, house we bought when we first got married, of course, it was 34 years ago. We paid about $28,000 for a 720 square foot house. Yeah. That same house now is that $180,000 plus, $200,000 house, 720 square feet. And, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but, and then you were talking about, some of the like the ad valorem dollars. You said that the low, $796 per year was the average and $107,000.
I'm just reporting what it said.
I know. I was going, wait, what? Because I think my taxes on my house are like $3,600 a year or something. I'm going, $796. Where do those people live? You might have to move out to the country or something.
Yeah, it was just an average. And again, I just pulled up, to do it well, you literally have to pick a couple of price points in there and then just, hit every single thing. But I was just trying to kind of make because I mean, our property taxes are $3,200
Yeah.
a year. So
You did.
and my
I think you
mom's are
did-
26. So
Yeah. I think you did a great job with the way you put it together. I think you had some really good questions. At the end, one of the things that I wonder is, how do we do a better job of those people that truly, truly need this tax credit, that desperately want to do something different with their children's education? How do we get them into these schools? How do we get them to know that they have these options? And I'm gonna, this is not on the tax credit, but it kind of is, thinking about what's going on at Western Heights right now. I had a mother whose daughter was assaulted by another 5-year-old girl in the kindergarten bathroom at this school.
a 5-year-old,
5-year-old.
really?
And yes, and she two little girls. She crawled underneath the stall and violated 2 different little girls. So this one mother reached out, and she and I had some conversations, talked about what how that was being handled by the school and everything. And she's like, I just want my kids out of the school. I don't know where I'm going to put them. And so she would have been, a perfect candidate for this school choice tax credit. Absolutely perfect person to qualify for that. And so those are the kids, those are the adults, those are the parents that we want to be able to reach, to give them options, that when their home school is not supporting them and taking care of them in the way that they want their children to be treated and educated, they're the ones that deserve this opportunity to be able to move them. And if there's not another school in the area, then if there is a private school for them, then, they deserve to have that opportunity. I know I told you earlier that the way I kind of look at it, and I think that you mentioned that Nathan Dahm kind of said, once you pay all these other taxes, that it kind of works that way. And Brett Farley actually touched on it too. It's like the money that I pay in ad valorem that goes to the school in Newcastle where I live. Well, what I pay in ad valorem is only a portion of what it costs to educate my kids. And so the state is putting in subsidizing the rest of that money to educate my kids. So my tax dollars may be going to that school and staying at that school where my children's homeschool is, but taking that extra money that's being subsidized by the state, that's what I'm doing by using my tax credit, or that's what I would be doing by using my tax credit. And so I think that that's where you and I kind of differ on this, is that, I look at it that, and I tell the story about out in Bridge Creek, which is just next door to Newcastle. They don't have an FFA program, or they didn't at one point. They may now. Those students that live in Bridge Creek that want the FFA services, they can transfer into Newcastle so that they can have FFA. And so while their parents' tax dollars are still going to fund Bridge Creek, that extra subsidy that's coming in from the state to make up the difference now is going to go to Newcastle rather than go to Bridge Creek. And so it's a perfect example of them being able to use the dollars that the state is paying to educate kids to be able to, send them to another school.
It almost inevitably leads to.
Hold on one second. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, it's okay.
Sorry. I just had to get that. I wanted to get that in there because I wanted to ask you a question about this, but go ahead.
And so anyway, that's kind of where I'm at, and using those funds that's educating my kid. I should be able to use those any place I want to. And if it means having to go to a private school, I think about all these private schools that specifically educate students with disabilities. Like we've got one school, I think it's out in Norman, that's a school for autistic kids. Yeah. Then there's a school in Oklahoma City that is for students who have drug and alcohol addictions. And then there's others that are for Down syndrome and the deaf and the, hearing impaired and all of that. We help take care of all of these other different disabilities that, the students who don't have those disabilities have been kind of left out of that mix. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because it was funny, but when I was doing the tax credit thing and I was looking at it, I kind of better understand that perspective. I really hadn't, I don't think, kind of seen it from that perspective before. And so, I can go there with you, but the problem is I can go there with you to a point. And I'm going to bring in Alex Newman because Alex Newman can say it better than me. Okay. So hang on a second.
It almost inevitably leads to school choice, as is defined by the advocates of government funding for private schools and homeschools, ends up almost inevitably in the eradication of all genuine choice. And that's because what the government funds, the government will control. It's not like a might control at some indeterminate point in the future. It will. It's inevitable. It's like night follows day. When the government is funding something, the government's going to want to control that thing. And I mean, the courts have ruled consistently the government has not just the authority to regulate what it funds, but actually the duty. Those are public dollars. You can't just be throwing those around. I mean, what if someone's teaching their kids to be Nazis, as they argued in Utah moments after the school choice bill was signed? Well, we have to regulate homeschoolers. They're taking public money, and some parent might teach their kid to do a Heil Hitler salute. So this is going to result in radically more control over private schools and homeschooling until the distinctions between them are gradually eliminated.
That's my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, even as much as I can agree with you, because, I've had a child who has mental illness, and I haven't talked about it a lot, but I talked about it briefly in one podcast, and trying to get her help was impossible. I mean, just impossible, to the point where, my husband and I were so stressed out, we almost got divorced. I mean, it was that bad.
I'm sorry.
So well, and I'm not saying it for that, but I do appreciate it, but I'm not saying I'm just saying, I understand that there are pressures on families that somebody, if I'm not going to keep all my money because the government has to take it and will take it, and they'll take it by force, or they'll take my stuff or put me in jail, then yeah, I can see the fact of why can't I have some of that money back to get my kid in treatment? I mean, what's going on here? So I completely understand what you're saying, but I still can't get away from what Alex says.
Yeah. Well, and I
can't do it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. But I think that's the reason why it's a tax credit instead of a voucher. And I know that that's just playing semantics.
It is.
Because ultimately, when you look at those lower tax brackets, it ends up being a voucher. But that's the reason why it's labeled as a tax credit, and why it says you're going to get a refund on your taxes, or a refundable tax credit, because then when you designate it as a refundable tax credit, then the money, like, this is the reason why I've got a problem with them saying that the check is going to be mailed to the school, because when you mail the check to the school, then that becomes a voucher in and of itself. It's not a tax credit if you mail it to the parent, and then the parent pays for it. And so that's the problem that I have with the way that the rules are set up, because then that truly does designate and puts the place in there for there to be more controls to come through that. And that's what I kept saying the whole time I've been in the house. It's like, I am not for a voucher, other than, of course, the Lindsay Nicole Henry is truly a voucher. But I was definitely for Lindsay Nicole Henry, but any other universal school tax credit or school voucher, I'm not for it. But when it's a credit, when the government can't get involved, because I have a problem with the application process, because I shouldn't have to fill out an application. I should only have to, it's kind of like when I file my taxes, I should be required to upload to prove that my child is enrolled in a school. But I should be able to redact the name of the school. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we send in our receipts to prove the exemptions that we claim. I don't feel like this should be any different. I don't like where they're going with the rules and the way that they did that. I think that it needs to be completely separate. I need to be able to get the money back, let me pay for it, get the money back, or the school let me pay them whenever I get the money. And I don't like the way that's being done.
Okay, well, I'm going to read you.
Okay.
This is page 6.
Okay.
Stop laughing at me. It says each private school accredited by the State Board of Education or another accrediting association shall register with the tax commission. The application shall include, and it goes on to say just basic stuff, which I don't have a problem with, right? This is 3, documentation of the school's compliance with all relevant state and local regulations, including proof of accreditation. Because they said they had to be accredited. And that's another bone I have to pick with it. Okay.
I do too.
So
Homeschoolers aren't accredited.
No, they're not. And there are a lot of good private schools out there that aren't accredited.
That's right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, but now this program, let me ask you where accreditation comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's the caveat there too, Jenny, because it says the accreditation from the State Department or another entity or whatever it says there. So what does that open it up to?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
I mean, you can't tell me there's no control over governments, over private schools.
Yeah.
You can't say that because it
Yeah.
says that right there.
Yeah.
So that's my main beef with the whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I've said this before, and people always, oh my gosh, I get whatever. I don't care. But I don't want my dollars going to a private school. I don't want my dollars going, and it's not even my dollars, it's government. Well, I mean, once the government takes it from me, it's not mine anymore. It's kind of like getting robbed, right? I mean, I had the money, now you have the money. It's government money.
Mm-hmm.
There's not an earmark that's Sherry's dollars or Michael's dollars, it's not like that. It goes into a pool and it goes out. So it's government money. I don't want money from the state going to a private school. I don't want it. I don't want it because of the control factor that I just proved is in this tax credit.
You did.
I don't want number 2. Well, that I have boys and I can never get past that. So
I know duty, the word duty.
I know. It's like, what is it with boys and it ruins you for the
They're
rest
14.
of your life?
They're all 14, no matter how old they are. Michael, he's 14.
Because he's giggling over there. It's like, yep, she said number 2. Okay, so we've done that. But the second part of that is it will happen. I mean, I can just promise it will happen because, and you're nodding because you know what I'm going to say. The Satanists have already promised that if the state is going to give away money for private schools, they will open one of them their own. I will not have my money going to a Satanist school. But how in the world, with the way courts rule right now, because I guarantee this tax credit's going to end up going to court. I mean, there are already people that are trying to prevent it because they don't want public money going to private schools either for a different reason. But I just don't want the control because you will end up, like Alex said, it'll just become a homogeneous mass of education. And then I thought of I'm going to throw these questions up because I thought of these the other day as I listened to Brett Farley again. So he basically says in his clip, and if you haven't seen the clip, it's on our YouTube page. You can find it very easily. So all public school students will eventually attend private schools sponsored by the government via taxpayer funded vouchers or tax credits.
Okay.
So that's what it seems like he wanted when he was talking about. That's the idea because you have to get all kids out of the public school. So the public school dries up and blows away because it's so sucky.
Well, that is not going to happen. I'm just going to tell you, because if you look at what has happened in Florida, 50% of their students are actually in the public school system. The other 50% either go to some kind of a private school or to charter schools. And so even as hard as Florida has worked at it, it's never going to happen. Now, one of the things that I will say is that when you have options, and there are more schools opened other than just the government funded public schools, then it does alleviate the stress and the burden on the public school system. And so I think that, while they're doing it because, they believe that the government schools are vile, which they have changed
anymore.
a lot since I went into education in the early 90s, and what we have now is vastly different than what we had in the early 90s. I will say that. But I think that when you have, it's kind of like grocery stores, that when you have options, they are competitive, and you see price wars that go on items, everyday items that people use. And so you have a choice to go to Crest or to Walmart or to Target, which I don't shop at Target, but you have options
Better not.
of where you're going to shop. And it should be that way with education. We shouldn't be limited to how we can educate our children, because not all children are successful in the same environments. And,
sure.
I think Brett is wrong. I think that they have. I think that they have the notion that it will close public schools, but when you put it into the perspective that Alex was talking about, then it really does turn all schools into private schools at that point, right?
Well, and then
turns
here's
them all
my
into
other
public
question.
is what it does, actually, not private. It turns them into public.
Yes, correct. Turns them all into public schools. How can these operate as private schools if they're paid with taxpayer dollars? And I know what you said, the semantics of it, we're giving it to the parent, and then the parent signs the voucher over to the private school. But in essence, it doesn't matter, because the conduit, the money still comes from the government. It doesn't matter whether you funnel it through the parent or not. It's still taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the lawsuits are going to end up coming in. I don't see, and I'm not an attorney, and I didn't stay at whatever the motel is overnight. I'm just saying, I can't see how you can get around that argument. Where do the dollars? The judge asks, where do the dollars come from? Do they come from the family? Well, by way of the government.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you hear school choice people say, that's tax dollars that I paid in. And so
Right.
I should be able to use my tax dollars. And so you have that difference, like you say, in the semantics, that some people say, well, those are my tax dollars. And then other people say, well, no, once you said it earlier, and I think you said it on the other podcast, is that once you pay it in, that is no longer your money. That is the state's money, and they can do with it, whatever they want to do with it. And so the tax credit, that's what they're doing. My fear is that, right now we have a Republican controlled.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
actually, Sherrie, that's an excellent point. It matters who's in control.
Yes, it does. Think about if the legislature were to flip back and it became Democrat controlled, then what would they do with this policy? And then they definitely would go in and put more constraints. But here's what's interesting about this is that, we talk all the time about government control of education, and who are the people who are wanting to limit testing and to stop using the end of the year test as a measurement of a student and how they're doing?
Me. I do. But am I on the wrong side on that one too?
Well, Democrats, you hear Democrats all the time saying,
I'm not a Democrat.
Huh?
I'm not a
You're
Democrat.
You hear all the time. That's who you hear talking about, limiting testing. You think about the testing came in, I guess did it come in? When did it come in? I was teaching late 80s, right? Late 80s, early 90s.
It had to have been, because I was teaching in 92, and I didn't have to give I didn't have to give a state test to my high school kids
Yeah.
in 92.
Yeah. So I was teaching in the early 90s, and I did. I mean, I remember
There's no child left behind.
Yes.
That's what started that. It was no
So-
child left behind because he said you had to have 90% of all kids being proficient. Ha ha ha. Or you would, get, and that's another thing about,
Hi, Dad.
Hey,
How are you doing?
I'm trying to find my pants.
They're in there in your bedroom, Dad.
They are?
Yep.
Now let me go find them.
Okay. I'll get your coffee when you get back.
Okay.
oh my goodness.
Boxers.
That was
Oh,
funny.
You
I
I'm
called
told
me.
so sorry.
Boxers.
That was so
Well,
funny.
that's almost appropriate school attire in these days.
Yeah.
It almost is, isn't
Sure.
it? Anyway,
Sad thing to
so
say.
what were we saying?
I don't remember, but let me hit this one. Most private schools in Oklahoma are waitlisted. How will we find schools for all these new students? Where will all these new private schools come from?
Well, I think that the idea behind this is that when you open this up and give more parents the money to be able to move their kids, that the demand for that is higher. And so therefore you will see more schools either open up more opportunities, or that you will see more schools begin, which I have started seeing so many. And I don't know if it's because of the tax credit. It might be a combination of things, but I'd be interested to see how many new applications for charter schools have come through in the last 3 years. I'd be interested.
Well, I mean, and you had COVID, which, did quite a bit.
Exacerbated
Okay, so
that.
here's another question. What's to stop existing private schools from raising their rates once they're receiving voucher dollars? Because here's the other thing. They know, and we've proven this over and over and over again. Dr. No used to talk about this all the time. Government bloats. Anything that government funds bloats because they know it's a free paycheck, right? I mean, it's not like you can ever not get paid by the government, right? So everything that is government subsidied bloats.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I think I believe that there are schools out there that actually work on sliding scales. I don't know how many of them actually do that, but I do know that there's conversations that I've had with some private school people, and they've said, we're going to, if they want to come here, we're going to come here. And that some of the church people actually offer scholarships to help make up the differences between the cost to educate them and what the parents actually get. So, I mean,
well, let me posit something else that just popped into my head. So we had Lauren Straka on our video podcasts several months ago, and she has a private daycare that's now becoming actually a private school. And she believes firmly that this tax credit is a way to regulate private schools. And she said, I will not take that money from them. That's not going to happen because I just, believe that this is going to happen. She also said this, I will not become accredited because I don't believe in the accreditation process the way it is. I don't like it. And so I'm not going to become accredited. So now what we're doing is we're doing what we do when we give business tax credits. You look at all of that money that we gave Canoe. Canoe is now out getting more money from someplace else, even after we gave taxpayer dollars from them. It was an absolute fiasco. It was just like, I always say it wrong, Michael. Who was it that we gave the money under Obama? The Solyndra?
Yeah.
Was it Solyndra?
Yeah.
I always want to call it
the solar people.
Right. And Solyndra went belly up, and we gave them all those billions of dollars to start this great solar company. So what's going to end up happening is the schools that aren't accredited, right, that can't bring in those tax dollars, they're going to wither off, or they're going to have very few students while you have these other students. So it's kind of doing what we do with the business tax credit. We pick winners and losers.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that there's the parents that want their child to go to a school that is not accredited are going to stay in those schools. And
how fair is it that they don't get that? because they're safe. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. It's it's a mess.
I mean, we've not made competition. We've unleveled the playing field even more.
Yeah. It's a mess. I'm not saying that I'm happy about it, because I'm not.
Not
but I don't
either,
know what
but
the
I just like
solution is.
discussing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
I don't know what the solution is, Michael.
yeah. Well, and on that competition sense, because you mentioned that earlier, Sherrie. Okay, so with the advent of this money going into private schools, probably more kids are going to get into private schools, or at least more schools are going to start. So we should see the results of that competition. In like what would you think is a feasible time frame? 5 years, 2 years, 10 years. I mean, I would think if you've got obviously we're not going to have a mass exodus into these private schools, but ultimately, I mean, it was about competition. They kind of sold that whole thing as, it's going to make the public schools work harder and to compete. So I want to see, what do you think kind of a reasonable time frame is to see results, since we are at the bottom? I mean, we're literally at the bottom of education barrel as far as performance goes.
I think it'll be a 3 to 5 year process. And I think it's taken Florida 10 years to get to where they are. So, and the reason why I think it's going to be that long of a process is because if you look at how long it took them to get the Tulsa Classical Academy opened up, even though it's a charter school, it's not private school, but it's a 2 to 3 year process to get a school open. And so the schools that are going to benefit from this right now are the ones that are already open. But it's like you said, a lot of those have wait lists. But, I have heard people say that, their private school has done everything they can to go ahead and make room for more students, knowing that this tax credit is coming. And so I don't know. It's just it's really unpredictable, and it's going to be interesting to see the way it plays out. But if you I go back to Florida, if you look at what they have done and how long it's taken them, it's been a 10-year process to get 50% of their kids out of the public schools and into charters and privates.
Well, we kind of already talked about, I said the government should have no control over private anything. So how does the taxpayer know whether their dollars are being properly used? Because if you're still going to keep that wall between private but this money is really coming from the government, how can you even have accountability to taxpayers? How is that going to get enforced? I mean, do you see what I'm saying?
I do. But I also think that, parents that want to move their students out of a public school into a private, and this is what you hear, people like Farley and some of the other school choice people say, is that once you move your child out of a public school into a private entity, I don't even remember what I was going to say. Hang on. Parents tend to look at it a little bit differently whenever they've got their money going into that school. I mean, I don't see why it should be any different, but it's just kind of been a mindset that parents have trusted the public school system in the past, and that you've dropped your kids off at the front door and, you send them in, and you think the people inside those walls think the way you do. And so we haven't really given it much thought when we drop our kids off. Well, now since COVID, things have changed a little bit, and or a lot of bit actually. And so parents are more engaged now. So I think that that's the whole thing with the private school, is that once you get into a private school and you are paying for that private school, then you've got the mentality that they pay more attention. I don't know. Maybe they don't pay more attention to it. I don't know.
I can tell you from just all my business dealings, Sherrie, if let's just take like my son, for example, like if my son is going to do an investment or something like that, and I just give him all the money and not make him, work his way up, he's never going to have the results. It's never going to be as poignant to him because he's not spending his own money. He's just getting money. It's just another thing for him to do. And that's kind of the same way I see this thing. If parents, if we could develop something that was more, I don't even know the right word for it, but if we could develop something to where like the mother that you said earlier with the 5-year-old daughter, if they are the fifth, yeah, maybe she was a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
But anyway, if those people, really took education into their own hands, said, hey, we want to make a change. We're going to be involved in this. We're not just going to drop our kid off because we're getting money to just drop our kid off. The parents are going to be instrumental in how well that education is played out in the first place. So that's where I see just a major problem is, anytime you subsidize anything, it never really works, like the performance side that you think it's going to.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something there, and you articulated kind of what I was trying to say. What is really sad to me is that if all parents would just be engaged in education, regardless of where they go, they would be able to advocate for and ask for the education that they want their children to get if they would just be involved. And that's, right. I think that's part of the problem that we have right now with public schools is that parents are not engaging. And, now they're being pushed out by some districts. I'm not going to paint with a broad brush here, but some districts, since COVID, now they're not allowing parents back into the school. They're allowed into the office, and that's as far as they get to go. They're not getting to have, they're not being able to be classroom moms and going in for the parties and going in for lunch and that sort of thing. And so they're being actually shut out of the schools, which is making it worse. And honestly, that's what's pushing a lot of parents out of the public school now. And so, it really is. I wish that I had a magic wand and, could fix all of the things that's going wrong with public education right now. But in order to be able to do that, you've also got to go in and you've got to start with the families. You've got to fix families, because if everybody was engaged the way they should be, there would be, everybody wants to have options. So I think that would always be the case. But, if everybody would be engaged and go to school board meetings and go to the parent teacher conferences and get to know their principals and their assistant principals and the counselors and the school teachers and volunteer at the schools if they can now, we wouldn't have all this. I mean, I go back to, I use this line about the Leave It to Beaver days, that you think about, the way Beaver's mom was, stay-at-home mom. I picture her, going to the PTA meetings and being involved in the school and being involved in the education of the kids. And if we had that still, we might still be where we were in the 50s and 60s when parents were involved in education.
Well, let me bring this one up because we're running out of time.
Yes.
Here's a big question. This has to be answered. What's to keep participating private schools from becoming as bad as public schools are now? Because I can tell you at least two major private schools in Oklahoma City. One of them had a party where they celebrated the sex change operation of an elementary school student. And they're very woke curriculum. So, we've got a state superintendent out there going, we will not go woke, but then we're going to put these kids in private schools, many of them that have, this kind of curriculum, and my state dollars are going to pay for that when they're already paying for that anyway.
Yeah.
And I thought we were supposed to be doing better.
Yeah. I mean, you are exactly right, because I've talked to many parents that have kids in, even some of the higher, the schools that don't accept the current tax credits that we have, or the vouchers, that we have right now. They are actually doing this. I've got a story of one where they brought in a group, I'm trying, Anti-Defamation League, brought them in to talk to the high school students. I'm thinking, and this is a private school. And so at this point, if you are actually physically paying for something and that's what you're getting, why are you sending your kids there? If that's not how you want your kids educated, why are you sending your children there?
Well, but
You have
here's
the
the
option to pull out.
Exactly. But here's the other side to that. So if you can argue that the private schools are not going to be influenced by government tax dollars, but you can't assure me that these private schools aren't going to become just as bad as the public schools, how does that work? Then you're just telling me that we're going to give state money away to do whatever.
Yeah.
If it works, it works.
Yeah.
We'll just throw spaghetti at the wall.
Well, and they, that the school choice people, they talk about competition all the time. Is that, if you've enrolled your student, and then next thing you know, they've, adopted the SEL curriculum, the bad stuff, and started doing some of this anti-defamation stuff, and what are they called? Privilege walks and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
Then you're getting what you pay for if you leave your kids there, but the competition piece of it, just like all of us did. I mean, go back to what we did to Target. When Target had the things in their stores that we didn't want, we quit shopping there. And that's what parents are going to have to do, no matter whether it's public or private schools. You've got to figure out where the line is and draw the line in the sand, and then not cross it. And if you cross it and you allow your children to stay in those places, it's on you. At that point,
but that's if you're right. But that's if you're using your own dollars, not, what are tax dollars.
Well,
right, because it's the same thing we argue about public schools. They're using our tax dollars and they're producing a crap result. And it's just as it's the same exact thing. But here's my biggest thing. If we believe public schools are failing, why did the legislature give them more money every year? The legislature has appropriation ability. Couldn't you come up with withhold some funding until scores come up? Wouldn't it simply be easier to make public schools do their jobs rather than to enlarge government to put kids in private schools? See, this is what I don't get, because it seems to me you've already had our superintendent out. He basically forced Deborah Gist in Tulsa to resign. And, we already looked at Tulsa Public Schools proficiency rates on Wednesday with Reed Downey, and they're just atrocious, just like Oklahoma City's are.
They're bad.
But basically he ended up, pushing so hard that she just finally went, fine, and gave up, right? Why, if we can even do that, at one of the biggest school districts in Oklahoma, why can't we start making the rest of the mind? Why do we have to do all this smoke and mirrors and, well, I'm going to call it a voucher, but it's really not, it's this. Why can't you just say, I'm not going to give you any money. If you can't behave, I'm not going to give you any money. And then you figure out how to make this.
Because that's not how it works, Jenny.
It's not. Unfortunately, it's just not.
I mean, you've got the public has agreed to fund public education. I mean, we've on a basal level, we've basically said, okay, we're all going to contribute, and then we're all going to just let this money go to the schools. The state is going to, kind of watch over them, but just like anything that's government controlled, it's out of control. But I think on a social level, we've all agreed that our tax dollars are going to go into public education, whether it's good or not.
Okay, but I'm not saying defund them. I'm saying give them less money, because there is a slide I have in here. I don't know if I can oh, there it is. Here's the slide. Okay, so here's the slide. Growth in administration, staff, principals, and teachers and students since 2000.
Yeah.
88%. So we're not even funding kids. We're funding administration in the first place. So why can you not? Makes no sense to me why you can't just go in there and go, you know what? I'm cutting your appropriations down until you behave. And if you need to get rid of some of that extra staff, well, too bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's two issues here. The first is that there was legislation that was proposed in order to say 60% of the money that a school gets has to go into the classroom. It has to be proven that is going directly to educating kids.
Who's proving that, though?
Pardon me?
Who's proving it, though? Do we have the data on that?
Well, you would have. It didn't get passed. It didn't get passed.
Oh, okay.
And yes, that was fought by the alphabet mafia.
Yeah.
And so that didn't get passed because they don't have to abide by that. And they have their reasons. I don't remember what that was. It's been a couple of years since that went through the House, but we didn't get that passed. So I do agree that we need to figure out how to say you can only pay so much. You think about businesses, right? Businesses are public businesses, regardless of whether or not, the only way that they're public, and I found this out, the only way they're not public is if they're an association, which is why we can't touch some of those associations. That's a whole other story.
OSSBA or COSA?
Yeah, we can't regulate them because they're an association. So, but businesses, they have benchmarking, right? They say, this job title, their pay should be between, X and Z, and, there should be 3 levels in between. And then, this is the cap that you put on that. Well, we don't have that in schools. The only thing that we have is a minimum pay salary. We don't say superintendents are going to be paid X number of dollars per student. Which if we had that, then you could regulate how much money a superintendent makes.
Because a superintendent makes 6 figures.
Yeah.
And
but
major benefits.
So, and they get stipends and things for the extra jobs they do. I don't have a problem with that. But what some schools would argue is that in order to get a good superintendent to come out to a small district, you're going to have to pay them more to get them out there, because they're living, they may be living out in the middle of nowhere. And so I totally understand that concept. But that if we would regulate and say only this amount can go towards administration, only this amount can go towards, whatever, other funds, but then you're pulling that local control away from those districts to be able to build. I know it's all so convoluted, Jenny. It really
I know,
is.
because then the argument becomes, well, we can use state dollars at private schools, but we can't even regulate the state dollars at public schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how this is going to happen. It just seems to me but the government is so fond of doing this. They make one mess in one place and then leave it and go off and create a mess in another place.
Yes, they do.
And that's just dumb.
Yeah.
Fix the mess you have.
Mm-hmm. I've been saying that for 5 years. I've been saying that for 5 years. And so anyway, here we are. The other piece of that is the, you were showing, let me think, what was it?
You want me to put back?
There were two parts to that. Thinking about limiting,
because I said, couldn't they withhold some funding until scores come out?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So the other piece of that is that we've got to go in and we've got to modify the accreditation process.
Yes.
That you shouldn't get an excellent or whatever the top rating is on the accreditation process if your students aren't learning. I don't care how many reports you have that if your children, if those children in that school are not coming out of a 12th grade education, reading on a 12th grade or better level, then you should not be accredited. And so I believe that outcomes should be tied to accreditation. And then when you do that, then I think that fixes the funding issue and the problems that we're having with giving
That's an excellent
schools
point.
money. And and as well as I do, and people will argue this, but what I have learned in the 5 years that I've been in the legislature, and I honestly, before I got into the House, I realize now how truly rose-colored my glasses were, because I thought people were in the classroom for the same reasons that I was, going into administration for the same reasons that I did. And, I've realized, and again, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush, but, when you've got schools, and this may not be happening in Oklahoma, but I guarantee you it's happening somewhere, where they test more kids for disabilities to get them on IEPs so that they get that funding that goes with that designation. And same
I
thing.
talked to several parents, and it is happening here.
Yeah. And I don't have any proof of it, so I'm not going to say that it is, but I would love, to be able to figure out a way to do an audit system in order to, because if you have more, I think the number is 13%. If you have more than 13% of your population of students on an IEP, I think that's the number. I may be remembering wrong, so don't quote me, but if you've got more kids on IEPs than what is like the standard percentage overall for the population, then somebody's doing something that they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
It's just like when some of the funding cuts came down, what some of the schools started doing, and I know this because I was in Oklahoma City at the time. Before, in order to be tested for gifted, you had to have certain grades. You had to be referred by at least one or maybe two teachers, and there had to be a consensus to be able to say, looking at a portfolio, to be able to say this student looks like they possibly.
That's the way it was when I was teaching. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this student could possibly be gifted. Let's test them to see if they are. So they went from a portfolio type situation for gifted and talented to let's just test everybody. And I have a problem with that the same way I have a problem with that one test at the end of the school year determining there's so many things that one test is used for, that it just should not be done that way. I feel that way with the gifted program too. Just okay, let's just blanket test everybody and see, throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I just don't agree with that either. And so, so many problems, so many issues that need to be addressed, but there's so many of them that, the public school systems, it is a beast. And the federal government having their fingers in it just makes it even worse. So, I don't know. I could probably make you a list a mile long of things that need to be addressed. And why don't we just address those issues? And that's one of the things that I said in caucus one time. It was like, why don't you guys get on board with me to fix the problems that we're having in the schools that make parents want to get their kids out of public schools?
Yeah.
We fix the problems, then we don't have to have all of this other stuff. Crickets. Absolute crickets. And
well, do you think it's because, and I'm going to ask you this, if you want to answer it, that's fine. Don't you think that it's because of the fact that in their districts, their superintendents, they listen to their superintendents more than they listen to anybody else in their district?
Mm-hmm. I absolutely believe that. Now, it's not true. Again, I'm not going to use a blanket to say that all representatives are that way and not all senators are that way. But there is a good percentage that they listen to the superintendents, and if the superintendent is against it, they don't support it.
Well, I'll tell you, as an activist, and so this goes long way back, and when I first started all the way through Common Core, so many times, and I won't blanket either, like you're saying, but I will say a whole lot of times, I would bring this up, and they'll say, my superintendent doesn't want that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't give a crap what your superintendent wants. That's
what do your
not
constituents want?
What correct, or what's just right.
Yeah.
If we're Republicans, and here's the other thing that really, I hate to say this, but it chaps my hind end parts very much. If we say we're Republicans, the one real tenet of Republicans is that we don't grow government.
Yeah, definitely.
If you ask what a Republican is, and anybody actually happens to know, that is the one thing that bubbles to the top, is that we don't grow government. This whole tax credit, that's nothing but growing government. It's nothing but growing government. It is because you've created a new bureaucracy at the OTC to take care of that. Mm-hmm. Now you've got to have all of these other people who are handling all of these, looking up this and looking up that. It's going to require massive amounts of staff to make sure that that's handled at all. And none of us are still going to know if that's if that money going to a private school is actually doing anything. Until then, the government steps in and say, oh, well, because it'll be just like the gear funds. Oh, well, that didn't go very well. We found out that was misused by parents and kids. So we're not going to do that anymore. Government better step in and fix that. And that's, I just see this happening because I've seen it happen before. I'm not making it up.
Yeah. Well, and I think that more and more we see people say, oh, we need the government to fix. No, parents need to be the ones stepping up and stepping in and going, okay, you're not educating my child the way I feel like my child should be educated. And so what are you going to do in order to meet the needs of my student? And when they don't, they need to be moving their kid to another school. And regardless of what that is, I mean, if you can't find a public school to support them, you're going to have to find a private school that will. And I just, just like Farley, he always goes back to, it's about competition. It's about creating competition. And, but the problem is when you create competition, but people don't use that competition the way that they can in order to get what they need or what they want, then competition doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So, I mean, it all comes back down to the consumer. It really, truly does all come back down to the parents and the consumer. And if they're not doing their job in order to ensure that they're getting what they should be getting for their tax dollars or for the money that they're spending, if they're not advocating for it, it's really the problem that we're having in America right now.
Yeah.
Period. I mean, you can look at the tax rolls. We've got 1.1 million. I think we've got 2.2 million registered voters in the state of Oklahoma. 1.1 million of those are Republicans, and how many of those actually go vote? About 26%. And so, and I bet you that you could probably, that'd be interesting to compare the rates of the parents that are involved in their kids, day-to-day education, and how many actually vote, and how many exercise their authority, by going to school board meetings and city council meetings and, that sort of thing. I mean, if only 26% of the people are engaged in the government, then, we're not using the power that we have.
People.
Yeah. We're not using the power that we have in order to be able to get government to do what we need it to do. It's our government. And yet people are like, okay, like me, they vote me in. 26% of my voters, Republican voters, voted me in, and they send me to the Capitol. And of course I believe that I'm one of those that they can trust. But others do that. They send them up there and just assume that they're doing the right thing, and they're not. I mean, I was not right on some of the votes that I made the first 2 years I was in until I figured it out. And then once I figured it out, then, I mean, this is what you got now. But anyway, if you're not holding people accountable and you're not doing your due diligence in exercising your authority, then you're getting what you're getting what you are choosing.
At 150 million %. I mean, I just made up a percent there because, that's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
But I think here's the problem. Over the years with dumbed down education like we've had, we all know Common Core was just, recitation and nonsense. So with all of that, we have literally bred out knowledge and desire for individual liberty.
Mm-hmm.
So when you even talk to, I still go back, I tell this story all the time, but it's so germane every time. I remember talking to a legislator about Gary Bands. That's who it was. It was Gary Bands, Representative Gary Bands from Midwest City. And I went in and we were talking about Common Core and the bill. And, I said something, I was trying to get him to, vote for the bill. And he said, and I don't even remember what the context was, but he said, what do you think they send us up here for? To make law. No, Gary, they send you up here to protect their liberty.
Mhm.
That's what they send you up here for. Where did you get that it was to make law?
Yeah. So one of the things that I would change, if I were in charge of the House, one of the things that I would do is I would create a class on the Oklahoma Constitution
That's a good idea,
and
actually.
educate all incoming freshmen on the Oklahoma Constitution, and then I would also create one on the U.S. Constitution, and that would be a required professional development that new incoming representatives would have to go to. And
Excellent idea. And
yeah.
so why are you leaving again?
Well, because of what I've learned in the 5 years that I've been there, that the real power exists in the grassroots. But if the grassroots don't know that they have that power, they're not going to wield it. And so we've got to do a better job of engaging the grassroots and getting them to go to those meetings, city council, holding their representatives accountable, going back and watching committee videos on votes and watching the legislature. And I mean, and I know there are people, that's not what people want to do, but if they want their freedoms, if they want to be able to sustain what was created 247 years ago in this country, they're going to have to get engaged. They're going to have to turn off the TV and, read, listen to podcasts, listen to committees, go to the city council, school board.
But Sherrie, Facebook, TikTok, but Sherrie, I don't have
reality
time for
TV.
that.
Don't forget that one, Jenny.
And what?
I said reality TV. Don't forget that one.
Oh, that, yes, and endless streaming. I remember that song,
The Masked Singer. Let's watch
the
that.
what? Oh,
The
yeah.
Masked Singer. I don't watch TV, so I just happen to see what's on here at my parents' house. That's all I know. But anyway, yeah, I'm sorry.
You are 100% right. And I know that what's happened over time is that, it used to be back in Leave It to Beaver days, parents were involved. And then what ended up happening was that whole progressive teaching ideology that was put in place at Columbia Teachers University by, what is his name? The little Marxist. I've got his book over here about him somewhere. Oh, hold on. This was one of the best books I've read.
What is that?
This was so eye-opening. This is John Dewey and the Decline of American Education, How the Patron Saint of Schools Has Corrupted Teaching and Learning. Yeah. And it's a short little book. I mean, there's not much in it, but oh my goodness, did I underline things.
Almost everything. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a great book. And so once the progressive, one of my arguments about why they didn't want to have To Kill a Mockingbird, and remember they made a big deal about it and they were saying, we're going to ban that. It has the N word in it. No, if you go back and you read that book, Scout is detailing the progressive education movement throughout that whole book.
I'll have to go back and read it from that perspective.
She is. And the teacher who showed up from Illinois and she had those red painted fingernails and all she ever wanted the kids to do were projects. And Scout got mad and said, I just, Atticus would read to me would read the New York Times to me by the fireplace every evening. Right. And the Bible. And so it started so long ago, and those progressive movements just pushed parents out. And so once parents got pushed out, they gave up, right? Once the progressive government started stepping in, then they started pushing people out because people realized they couldn't do anything if they were taxed and feed to death. And if they were going to try to do this, it was a huge bureaucratic red tape nonsense to try to get anything done. Then they just go, I'm out. I think the one thing that did so much to get people engaged again was the 2020 election.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. And COVID.
And
COVID.
COVID. Well, and I think I'm going to go back to Western Heights again. And if you go back and look at what's happening there with that principal and the idea that this gentleman is still the principal at that school, that nothing has been done about that. I think that speaks volumes as to where we are in our society. And again, I'm not going to paint with a broad brush. There's not, drag queens at every school, but the idea that that they're not choosing to move someone out of a position where there's questions about their choices outside of the school building. I think that speaks volumes about where we are, and there's teachers that are there supporting him. There's parents that have left their kids there knowing, and maybe not enough know what's happening. I don't know. I don't remember what the population of the Hispanic population is there.
It's high there.
Yeah,
it's
I think
high.
It's in the 30s. Seems like it's in the 30s, but
I think it's higher than that.
I looked at it. I don't recall. I don't know where I've got those numbers at, but anyway, when you go back and look at that, that is a telling piece.
And that kind of make my point though too, Sherrie, because clearly we have problems that literally aren't being taken care of. And if you just started solving the problems, this whole tax credit nonsense would be. So why is it
in a perfect world?
Mm-hmm. Well, I get it. I really honestly do. But again, and I still have this thing. I go back to, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime.
Sure.
And I think about that. And what we do when the government steps in and subsidizes anything is it takes away, because that's what always happens. Well, the people won't do it for themselves, so we have to do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so then they step in and they do it. And then once the people decide that they can't do it for themselves anymore, for sure, then they just give up. Yeah. And then that's how government gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the two wrongs don't make a right. And yet we are always constantly playing the two wrongs make a right somehow game. And that's another thing that needs to stop. Fix your problems. Move on to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Don't just continue to, molehill. Well, we're at 1 hour and 30 minutes. God love you, Sherrie. You have really hung in there the whole.
Well, it's very good conversation. So, and it's, we need to have more conversations about trying to solve the problems. And, if we don't have the conversations to solve the problems are not going to get solved. And it's people that need to solve the problems. It's not the government. I love that saying, I'm here, I'm with the government and I'm here to help.
We have got to, the 12 worst words in all of the English language was, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. Yeah.
And we have got to get we've got to get our people realizing that government is not the problem. Government is not the solution. They're actually the problem. And so, the more people exercise their authority and exercise their voice, that's grassroots. I say it all the time. Grassroots gets things done, but you gotta grow the grassroots in order to be able to get anything done. So,
or you have to teach people that they have individual liberty, and that is their primary existence here is that individual. So maybe that's what we just need to do is stop everything and go, hey, your liberty is important. It's the most important thing in the United States of America.
Yeah. And here's how you exercise it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll make that our next project. Okay, Sherrie, we'll do that one together. You and me.
Sounds good. I like it.
All right. Well, you have a great weekend. Be safe.
I
And,
will. Yes, you guys
be
too.
safe and aware. Yeah.
Yeah.
And but we will talk to you soon, and maybe we can make this a regular thing where you just come on and we talk about education and politics.
Let's do it. Let's do
Hey.
it. Hey, I can talk about it. I've got a whole laundry list of things that need to be worked on. So
Well, maybe we should. We'll just work that out and see if we can't just make that happen, because I do believe, and I know that you and I are absolutely 100% on the same page when we say you have to talk these things out. It just has to happen.
Yeah.
So,
and you were, one more thing, you were saying something about disagreements and debate. I love the word discourse.
Yeah.
That's my absolute favorite. I love that one. So anyway, maybe think about that.
Absolutely. Although I have boys, and you know where that went. So
yes, I do.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh my
Anyway.
gosh. Okay.
I need to get like a brainwash. I wonder if they have that.
Hey, I have two boys also. I've got two brothers, two sons, and a husband. So I
Those
completely
people will
get it.
ruin you.
Yeah. Like
All right,
turning
Sherrie,
part of our brain into a 14-year-old boy.
That's exactly right. It's so good to see you as usual, and we will talk again soon. And you and I will get together here in the next upcoming after the weekend, and we'll see what we can work out, because I think that's actually a great idea.
Yeah.
So,
I like it.
Yeah. God bless. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
God bless. See you guys.
All right.
Bye.
Boy, that was a good one.
Well, Sherrie, she really is the best, and she, we need to just create like a Liberty class with Sherrie. Like once a month, Liberty with Sherrie, or something like that. But to hit on a couple things, a problem that I still see, Jenni, that we really haven't even talked about it. I mean, I think according to the current funding formula in the state, which if you pull your kid out of school, even to homeschool, the school still gets money for 2 years. I think that's the current. Does the tax credit program, does it account for that? I mean, you take your kid out of public school, you go put them in private. Now you're going to get a $7,500, subsidy there, and then the school's still going to get $5,000 or whatever, the $10,000 or whatever was appropriated for 2 more years.
You should have mentioned that.
Yeah, I thought of that, and then we got off track, and I forgot to say something. But
do you not have a notepad there?
Yeah,
I need to come get you a notepad.
I have it written down, but to me, that's a fiscal. Yeah. That's a major fiscal violation. I mean, that's a double spend. I mean, you're basically double spending on every single child that comes out. Where's that money coming from?
Well, and don't forget that also in this thing, it says that if there's a tax failure, then it either drops down or goes away. So that's another thing that we never talked about with her either, because that's another thing that just irritates me. So I've worked all this time to get my kid in private school, and now you're just telling me I can't be in that private school anymore. Now what do I do?
Yeah, well, what if you don't make the application process and you've made all these arrangements to get your kid in school? What about the people that take advantage of the system and get their warrant money or their money, but their kid drops out? Or what happens when they get expelled? Or there's a million things. How is the state going to recoup that money from those people? If they're not really paying it in the first place.
Well, yeah, no, you made some excellent points. Dang it, where were you? Were you doing business while I was talking?
No, you guys were going pretty good, but also I just wanted to clarify, and this will go back to something, that Brett Farley brought up. He brought up the EV issue with the cars, and the Tesla cars and all that. So I just want to hit on this. I don't think people understand that the government subsidizes the entire EV business. People don't want those cars. The true market, yes, there are people that want to have electric cars. There are people that want to, think they're not contributing to pollution. That's fine if they want to think that. But ultimately, the government is completely subsidizing the entire EV market. So there again, you have government intervention. You're going around the true market, the true price discovery, true market discovery, the entire thing. And if you let the market play out, people wouldn't buy those cars. Those companies would be out of business. They're only in business because there's government control ultimately at the end of the road with these cars. And it's the same thing here with school. If you subsidize competition, okay, which is basically their biggest argument all the time is competition. Well, if you're subsidizing competition and no one has any skin in the game, if a parent doesn't have skin in the game and
that makes me laugh.
Well, they're just.
Let's try this because you'll be good at this. Let's try this. So you and me are playing a game. I can't think of what the game would be. Okay. But you and me are playing a game and we start out with low, like Monopoly. Monopoly is probably a pretty good example of that, wouldn't you think? Because we start out with the same amount of money, right?
Yeah.
And if you make, I mean, part of it is luck, but isn't that true in the real world too? I mean, part of it is luck. Or blessings from God, I should say that. Yeah. I don't believe in luck, but blessings from God. Well, and you just build on what you have, but you can't have competition if this person, if you're getting subsidized with Monopoly money and I'm not, how is that competition?
Yeah. Well, let's just say it like this. Let's say I'm an expert at Monopoly. You're a novice, okay? So we're going to sit down and play. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to smash you every single time we play.
And I'm not playing with you.
Yeah. So you don't want to play with me. You're going to go do something else. But in the meantime, every time you go around you get an extra $5,000 because you're not as good as me. So we need to promote you being able to compete with me. You know, that's what this whole thing is. This whole thing is that exactly.
Time, that was such a great example.
But here's my point, Jenny. Is that going to make you a better player? No. That's not going to make you a better player. It's not going to give you more critical thinking and figure out really how to beat me. All you're going to do is you're going to have more money than me, and you're never going to really understand the strategy and concept of that game. Or, you know, we're just relating this in life in general. You're never going to understand because you didn't put the time and you don't have the skin in the game and the experience and all the things that you have to do to actually learn. You never learned to play. You know, the government came in and gave you that money every single time you went around. So you didn't have to learn. You got the shortcut of not having to learn. And that's where we are. I mean, so you're never going to have the result. Yes, you may beat me, but it's on a technicality of you're getting this subsidy. But if we had to go head to head with nothing else, you know, just true head to head, you know, the person I would win that. You know, I'm not saying that in real life, but I'm just saying as an example, as an analogy, that is exactly what this is. So you're subsidizing these schools. They're not going to have any better. I guarantee you they're not going to have any better results. We're going to be sitting here 5 years from now. We're still going to be at 40% reading level proficiency. You know, even in the better schools, maybe 50 or 60, and that's it. We're going to be in the exact same place, and our taxes are going to be higher, and the government's going to have more control. That's how I see it.
That was awesome. I mean, I'm serious. That was awesome. I don't. That's awesome. I mean, that needs to be a clip in and of itself, just because that was so well said. I mean, that Monopoly analogy, you took my screwed up one and really made a good one, because that was phenomenal. I mean,
well, it's just like anything. If you don't have skin in the game, then it doesn't really matter to you. I mean, parents, instead of just dropping their kids off at private school, public school, now they're just dropping them off at public school. So Sherrie's right. We need to engage. Parents need to take responsibility, whether their kids are in public school or private school, because parents already take responsibility in, you know, the non-accredited homeschool type of situations. Those parents are responsible. That's why those kids have such stellar results.
Right.
Because of the parent. I mean, ultimately, that's what it is.
Well, yeah. I mean, and what Sherrie said, was phenomenal. I'm making a clip out of that because that whole thing is right. You can complain and but if you don't vote, I mean, our voting levels are ridiculous. People complain about, I've still got to sit down and do the facts and figures for the piece that I am eventually going to do on how bonds get moved in public school systems, because bonds usually go to do things like build stadiums. Ask me how that's going to teach your kid to read.
I agree.
How's that going to help him to do math? But we're going to take my property and tax my property so that we can have a better gym or a better whatever. Why aren't you taxing my property if that's what you feel like you have to do? I'll fight you for it every time. And if that's what you feel like you have to do, tax my property for something that's going to teach that kid to read.
Yeah.
I mean, our whole system is so upside down that we think sports, I mean, it's like, oh, you Texas weekend. Yeah. Well, if you cared as much about what your kid was doing in school as OU Texas weekend and who won that, we wouldn't even be sitting here. Yeah. We wouldn't be having this conversation. I probably wouldn't even know you, Michael.
Yeah. Well, without having, just completely pulling accreditation at these schools, it wouldn't be that difficult to create a tiered performance system with how much money you receive per student. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard. So if you don't incentivize someone to work harder, to do a good job, they're never going to. I mean, we all know that that's how it is.
It's just human nature.
Yeah, in public school, I mean, there's no incentives whatsoever. You have these huge salaries. These schools can just do whatever they want. They keep their accreditation. They keep all their money with zero results. You just have a simple tier that says, hey, if your kids perform at this level, now you get this much per child. All of a sudden, when you introduce incentives in there, that's bringing in true market type of mentality, and they're going to work harder. The superintendent's going to work harder. All the site principals are going to work harder. They're going to create better teams that are more effective, and they're going to use better and more effective curriculum to achieve those goals. But, it's just like if you don't have a goal, if people don't have something to strive towards, they're going to stay right where they are and just spin their wheels and just stay complacent and do nothing. I mean, that's just, I mean, like you said, it's human nature, but ultimately that's what it comes down to is if we don't incentivize these schools by taking away money for performance, then nothing's ever going to change. We're going to stay 48 or 49 or 50 in your graph. Show your graph again of the amount of money spent on these in these schools that's not going to kids.
Hold on.
That is just, if people really understood what just how bad those numbers really are. Yeah. When Sherrie said that they've tried to institute a bill, to appropriate X amount of dollars to go to the classroom, to the kids. But,
my gosh, it's even worse than we thought. Look, watch this. So the green is teachers.
And all
Here's
that
the green.
2000.
There you go.
Teachers
now
and
look,
students.
So teachers and students are now on the same level.
Yeah.
But holy cow, we've got a 37% increase in principals and assistant principals, and we have an 88% change in administration staff. That's just insanity.
Yeah.
It's insanity. Somebody should be stopping that from happening. And I could have sworn she said that bill had gone. I could have sworn that bill went through. It was interesting to me that she said it had not gone through. But again, we have a problem. Well, we have a huge problem with everything, as we just talked about today. But
well, we need to make Sherrie just a regular guest. And
I think so too.
Just really lean on her knowledge of all of this and everything she learned at the Capitol. And just, I mean, I thought her idea about installing the constitutional classes, the state constitution and the our country's constitution are just phenomenal.
So before we get out of here, because we're going to probably make 2 hours of this, which is not what we normally like to do, I just wanted to bring, this is our Twitter feed that I'm going through right here. But I wanted to talk about something just briefly. I'm going to write it up and I'll do a little bit more, stuff on it. But we talk about dark money. And this is kind of an interesting aside here. So just on Tuesday, there was an election in Senate District 32 because that senator retired to go work. I believe he went to go work for another government agency. So he, or a government associated, parallel, adjacent agency. Anyway, so there was an election in that area. And I got a text message from somebody who lives in that area. And it was a text message that was being sent out from Ryan Walters. Vote for JJ Francais, Senate. JJ will stop liberal indoctrination in the classroom. Ryan Walters. JJ Francis is the only candidate I can count on to help me stop liberal indoctrination in the classroom. JJ is the rock solid conservative we need in the Senate. Please vote for JJ for Senate on Tuesday. So here's my first question. Why is the state superintendent getting involved in a Senate race that's an off election year in a district in southeastern Oklahoma? That's interesting. And I thought it was interesting too, because on JJ Francais' Facebook page, before it was shut down, he had several pictures about this is a transsexual male and this is a transgender, I guess. I'm sorry, I don't know what to call things anymore. Transgender male and a transgender female. And how, he could understand, why couldn't people be what they wanted to be? And so I'm trying to figure out how does this work with this? And that's going to stop liberal indoctrination.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole screed that he wrote about how people are just scared of transgender people. And he has several transgender friends. And again, there's nothing, you do you. I'm a Christian. That's not, my bailiwick. But what I'm trying to say is if this is a liberal indoctrination problem that JJ is going to stop, but he has transgender friends and I guess I'm not understanding that. And then, so here's part of the problem. JJ Francis works for an organization in Oklahoma called Hillary Communications. Hillary Communications has given over 705, and this was written some time ago, $1,000 to candidates and PACs in Oklahoma. And the JJ Francais worked for Hillary Communications. Well, not only has Hillary given a lot of money to various candidates, but Edward Hillary is sitting on the this is the Career Tech Board. So he sits on the Career Tech Board, was appointed by Governor Stitt. And Dustin Hillary sits on the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education Board, also appointed by Stitt. He does not have a higher education degree. And then Governor Stitt, of course, goes out and stumps for JJ Francais. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on in terms of dark money, because I can go through some of that stuff, but influencing elections in the state. And that needs to be looked into a little more, because we've got elections coming up like crazy next year. And people need to know who's putting in money to try to get you to vote for who they want in office. And I think that's a pretty big deal.
Between you and Carmen, there should be no excuse. Between you, what Rope's going to publish, what you're going to publish, and what Carmen's going to have on her website, there should be no excuse to not being informed.
But people should want to know, because there's so much more, and I could pull it up, but we're not going to have time today. But there's so much more on that than I could pull up, and it's really a situation that I think people could refer to as what's called pay to play.
Yeah.
Which is not legal. I mean, and well, I guess that's not true because I can't find a law against it. So think about how nasty that is. So people can influence elections and appointments to different boards by the people that the politicians they give money to.
Well, that's the old adage, Jenny. The people that
is.
are writing the laws write them for their own protection and for their own control. That's just how it is. You know,
Yep.
until we stand up and say, hey, this ain't happening anymore, the good old boys club's always going to rule. I mean, that's just how it is.
Well, and it's like what Sherrie said about, parents getting involved. I mean, until voters get involved, first of all, you got to vote. I mean, and we hardly have a population in Oklahoma who votes. And I know a guy, he was actually our house painter. And he told me one time, I said something about, hey, there's a city council vote coming up. You probably better make sure you get this date on your calendar so you can go vote. And he goes, well, I voted for president. And I said, is that all you vote for? And he goes, well, president's the most important.
Yeah.
No, just in case people are wondering why I'm hitting myself in the head. No, local is most important, because think about it. If you had a great local government, the local government could tell the feds, could tell the state if they had to go pound sand.
Yep. And not put you in a mask and not shut your city down, not shut your church down.
Don't know what to say. All right. Well, we could probably filibuster for 8 more minutes just to say, hey, we finally did a 2-hour show, but everybody's left by now and we're just talking to ourselves. So, well, Michael, do you have anything else before we get off of here today?
No, I hope that Sherrie just really helps ignite the grassroots, and I think as we can keep getting information out, people just need to really just take responsibility. That's what it comes down to. Take responsibility for your own kids in your school, regardless of which school they're in, and that will just start that'll just kind of matriculate into everything else. That's why I'm here, because 2 years ago, I had enough. I saw the tyranny of COVID. I started fighting against my school and everything else. And now I'm here because I'm taking responsibility, and I'm not going to let it just slide anymore, because part of it was my fault. I was another one of these guys working, playing golf, going to the lake, doing all the fun stuff. I wasn't paying attention to what's happening locally with these officials, with my representatives. I mean, I didn't care, about politics at all, ever. But now it's a passion of mine. If I don't do something, nothing's ever going to change. And at least I can start. Maybe we can get 1 or 2 people going, and then, we just got to get a snowball.
Well, I'm glad you woke up, and I'm glad you joined us, Michael.
Yeah.
I am.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. I think we need to, I'm not sure who we have on for next week, or what our schedule is. So guess what? Michael and I will be chatting after we get off of here, and we'll let you know what we've got for next week. But trust me when I say, I am hoping to get that CD32 report done so that people can really see that, because there is a lot of stuff that goes on in there. So, that's probably something that we need to look at. So, all right, Michael, I hope you have a great Friday the 13th.
Yeah, well, I'll try to scare my kids somehow.
Hope you have a great weekend. And don't forget, join our Patreon. We don't do this. We do this because we feel like we have to, like Michael said, but it costs us money to be on StreamYard. It costs us money to be on WordPress. It costs us money to do these things. So please, if you find anything valuable we do, please throw us a bone. You can go to our website at www, and it's down at the bottom there. Just donate. Go to our donate page on rope2.org/donate. So thanks again for being with us, and we'll see you again next week.